Used to be that less than 1% of knowledge workers could make a workspace related decision. That fact has changed. Every single person who reports to the office has the ability to make a workspace related decision as to where they're going to go. And regardless of whether there's that return to office mandate, if going into an office is not compelling, it's not going to happen, and they're going to leave and they're going to go work someplace else.
Andrea, welcome to the Future Work Podcast. Gosh, it's great to have you back. Really enjoyed chatting with you last time. Um, what a background you have. You've worked with every major, not every major, but a lot of the major flexible workplace companies across the industry throughout your almost 30 years of experience. You're rolling your eyes like I shouldn't have said 30 years. But I'm really interested. You and I have discussed in the past, and I think there's a disconnect between the product that property companies, building owners are building, and the needs of the tenants, whether they're flexible workspace operators or tenants in general. Um, what is your thoughts on that?
Yes, and Frank, and I love riffing with you, and especially you. I always say that you ignite my brain on many different levels, and I'm expecting some probing questions from you today. So, this one is a good one. No question, I'm a marketer at heart, right? And so, when I think about where we are at this point, 20 years ago, I said that the current logic of real estate is dead. And it was probably a concept before its time. But there is no question that the product, from a commercial real estate standpoint, from an office standpoint, the product that is on the market is incongruent and not necessarily serving the needs of the consumer. The consumer being enterprise customers who are grappling with the fact that their long term leases um, that they were banking on are hurting their business because only 40% of their people are showing up. And so, literally, it's draining millions of dollars a year for a large user.
Well, it creates a lot of debt on their balance sheet too that's not necessary, and that restricts their growth overall as a company, which, in case a point, challenges the security of the very employees that are there.
Well, it does. And in no world do you have a portfolio that is filled with fixed long term commitments. And there is no way that an enterprise customer, even a small to mid sized customer, or even a solopreneur can forecast out with an appropriate degree of certainty how much space they're going to need. And we all know that facilities is the second largest fixed line item for any company behind people. And when that decision is flawed or wrong, you put a stranglehold on the business. And we've seen this through ebbs and flows over the last two and a half decades that I've been in this category. I've been
I'd
focusing
say
on
over
it.
the last 2,500 years, I mean, the concept of a landlord, it comes probably from the Middle Ages, when the Lord owned the land and everybody had to deal with that person and that situation. So I think the whole structure is a bit anachronistic overall. But so we're talking not just about design and amenities, facility changes, things that people want, may or may not be willing to pay for, but we're also talking about the structure of transactions between the two parties. Um, and we've seen a reduction in term of lease in most markets over the last 25, 30 years. It's slowly been doing. Some markets like Hong Kong, you have a 5-year lease, a 3-year lease sometimes. The tenant, though, is required to do all the improvements on the space, so the tenant's actually at risk for the short-term lease there. So that's where it's gone too far balance wise in one area. And then in places in Europe, you have still have 10 and 15-year leases where the tenant's 100% responsible for all the maintenance on the building, and it might be a 200-year-old building. So, things are out of balance right now a little bit. How do we correct that? What can be done?
Yeah, well, occupiers or the consumers of this product are pushing back. And we're seeing, to your point, that lease terms have reduced from, on average, 10 years to 7 years. And we're also seeing that the amount of space that they're taking overall has reduced, by 33%. And so there is a pushback, and there is some, um, there is some response by the product suppliers, if you will, or the landlords who are adapting their spaces and including spec suites, for example, that enable smaller term space and enable shorter term agreements. And that's interesting. I'm not going to touch flex space right now because that's a whole different beast, but I think that there is some response and some recognition. On the flip side, in markets like San Francisco, and other markets that are similar, where there are soaring vacancy rates, and you hear from brokers that their clients or the landlords are still holding out and are bullish on holding out for traditional long-term leases. And it doesn't make sense.
If the property company leases the space at a new lower rate, then their building is revalued.
That's
If
right.
they sit on the empty space and say it's worth X, then the building isn't revalued. And the difference is that they don't have to come up with the capital covenant on the revaluation if the space is empty. So in many cases, they're better off holding the space empty for a while, trying to get that fantasy lease. And in some cases, they actually get it, of course, because that building doesn't get revalued.
Well, you always follow the money, right? You always follow the money as to why there's a stagnation in the evolution of in real estate, and that is exactly why. One of the core reasons. Layering onto that is that you have decision makers on the side of ownership who are fearful of recommending or suggesting an alternative solution to the long-term lease. And of course, you have brokers who are wondering how this is going to affect their livelihood, and will they get a market commission for an alternative solution.
Damn brokers. No, yeah. No, a broker makes a 70% commission on a 70-year lease that they get on a 10-year lease, so naturally they're going to oftentimes suggest that the landlord hold out for the longer lease. It impacts them overall. The challenge, I guess, is how when somebody builds a building, let's say it's a large building in a central business district of a major market. Let's say it's a 1 million square foot building, and their tenants are reducing the space that they're taking because of changes in the workplace, hybrid officing, remote work, flex officing, all the things that have been occurring pre and now post pandemic have been accelerating. So they have the same number of tenants, but the tenants are taking smaller space. Who fills that gap so that the building can economically make adjustments to the structure, or is it a trap that they just can't do anything about?
Well, I think that they have to. The writing is on the wall that they have to do something about it, because if you look at all the classical drivers of change, if you look at technology, which is enabling people to work everywhere and anywhere, if you look at government rules and regulations that are opening up because of COVID and because people were working remotely, that enable tax relief, if you will, or adjustments to taxes for people to work out of state. If you look at social norms, it used to be, my gosh, when I was at Ernst and Young, you were ranked by how close you were to the window and the size of your office and whether you had an office, right? So those social norms are changing.
I want to point out when I was at Deloitte, I had a corner office.
Ah, did you? I was there early on in my career, and because I was going for my MBA, I got to sit in a partner office shared closer to the window. That's how nuanced that got.
No,
So
I think
they have to change.
true, and it's funny. Um, I think that one of the things that people have to look at when they consider property is employment, okay, structures, and look at how many companies are hiring entry level personnel to do entry level jobs, Gen Z to do entry level jobs versus hiring an AI bot. Okay. And I've never seen a bot sitting at a desk.
No.
Okay. So when we look at the replacement of employees, not just the remote work or hybrid work of employees, but the actual replacement of employees, then we also have to rethink of the building designs and building this and that, and utilization density. And if density drops, revenues drop. If revenues drop, it's harder and harder to support the amenities that so many people are crying out for within large buildings and do it economically. Somebody's got to pay for that. So, how do you rectify those two things?
Well, I just want to double down on what you just said because it just occurred to me is that from an AI standpoint, and as AI replaces those lower level entry jobs, and to your point, they those are the people who have to show up to the office every day, and they're
Yes,
not now. And
yes,
so
they're
the
not.
knowledge workers, right, the senior level people are the ones who are working remotely anyway. And so all of a sudden your total addressable market for these landlords has really significantly diminished. And so to your point, that's a really incredible point. So the addressable market has changed. The product that occupiers or the buyers want has changed. And so, how do you cost effectively and efficiently evolve this? And so, I always look to categories that have already been established, right? Why reinvent the wheel? And so, landlords are already engaging with gyms, restaurants, um, to add amenity or to add vibrancy or to add nuance or points of differentiation to their building or to their asset to accommodate their occupiers. And
Sure.
so, I would just draw upon that. And how do you extend that to other ways to welcome and support all different product needs into your building?
Well, I think that works in a high density central. That's mid Manhattan thinking, central London thinking, downtown Chicago thinking. What about when you're in Chicago, you go out to Naperville? What about you go out to Geneva? You go into the smaller suburban markets where the people, an awful lot of the people that are commuting into these larger markets live and aren't working anymore. You where the buildings are smaller, 25, 50, 100, 200,000 square feet instead of a million square feet. And those buildings don't have the capacity to add a restaurant as a tenant because that's what the larger properties, they're not doing it for free. They're adding them as a tenant. They're adding the gym as a tenant. It still becomes an amenity to the building. But that doesn't exist. And about 70% of all commercial office space is not in central business districts. So how do you balance that out as a total program, or is this just a downtown central business district cure, and then we'll let everything else? We'll worry about everything else later.
Well, I think that there are different. I think there is a cure, right, for downtown. I think that's absolutely right. I always love to refer to 22 Bishopsgate, where they have, the core building, and then they've created a vertical village and an ecosystem, and they've done that through management
That's
agreements.
in London you're referring
And
to.
that's in London. It's actually the tallest occupied building in all of Europe, I believe. The Shard
Mhm.
beats it because of the
Sure.
spear, and they've done that incredibly well, and it's a very vibrant environment. And they're
But
also
how many square feet? What's the square footage or what's the square meters?
it's I can't it's very large.
It's about a 2.5 million square foot project.
It's very large. So how do you adapt?
It literally, if I can interrupt, it literally has as much square footage of that one building as a lot of mid-sized, smaller cities have.
Yes. And so what if you were instead, again, I'm just reimagining this and I'm thinking on the fly right now. First of all, there was a building that I'm looking at in suburban Atlanta, and they have reimagined this asset, and they in suburbia have put in a restaurant and a gym, and it is just it is a go-to destination. But that's, to your point, it's not that's not commonplace. And so you don't want to, the idea of adding these amenities is to increase NOI, right? To increase the value of the asset, not to take away from the space that could be monetized in a different way that may bring greater value to the building. And so maybe there's ways of partnerships. I'm so that you're extending your offering beyond the four walls of the asset, or maybe there's ways to, again, bring in through retail type or management type agreements or franchising, quite frankly, these smaller companies into the building, to provide a greater variety of vibrancy or resources or amenities.
At one time, IBM joint ventured with a lot of property companies. This is in the late 80s, I hope if I'm remembering correctly. They would take a major chunk of a major building along with equity in the building, and cause the building itself to have all of the corporate amenities they wanted as if they were building their own campus. Um, but those amenities were open to the entire building because they had a piece of the building. They had a vested interest in doing that. Um, if property companies were to work closely with their anchor tenants and re-affect that type of structure, I think that would have an impact on the types of amenities that and the types of offering they could make. But it would take a big commitment, a capital commitment on the part of the partner, the corporate partner, which they may or may not be willing to make. That didn't work out well for IBM, by the way, because the market changed, and all of a sudden the asset on their balance sheet turned to a liability, and they had to get rid of the space. So, because of the change in the real estate market that had nothing to do with their business. So this is a risk that an occupier in that structure, that situation has to consider. But do you think property companies should look more at the campuses and the structures that their major tenants are building for themselves, look at the amenities they put in for their employees there and try and replicate that within their buildings? How do you think that should happen?
I think that's right. I think that there's what occupiers are how they are constructing their workplace to meet and adapt to the needs of their team members is important. We always say that it should work, the where you work should enable work, but it would, in an ideal world, it enhances work. And so you would hope that these enterprise companies have the resources and the wherewithal to create environments that enhance work. And so for landlords, to look to their occupier partners, to look to these enterprise customers, and to inform the evolution of their asset based on what what they feel will enhance the work of their people is important. You want to have purpose built space. You want to have spaces that enable people to connect, that's meaningful, that gives purpose to coming into the office. And really, it doesn't require a complete revolution of the space. I think that there are opportunities to evolve the offering, because when you look at these, ultimately we've got these fixed assets. They're brick, they're mortar, they're sturdy, they're solid, they're fixed. And so, how do you evolve the offering within these fixed assets? You can't revolutionize the offering.
I disagree with you, by the way. I think it has to
Ah,
be revolutionary. And we need to build cities within cities. So, villages within cities, in my opinion. And let's take putting a gym in a building as an amenity. Most of the gyms that I know, their biggest occupancy hours are between 5:30 and 7:30 in the morning and 5:30 and 8 o'clock at night. Those are not working hours when people want to be in their office buildings still. Most restaurants I know of that are successful serve lunch and dinner or breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Nobody wants to go to dinner in their office building. And without that category of income, a restaurant in itself is really just a lunch deli. And so a lot of the amenities that we talk about putting in are amenities where it requires a resident population. So I'm much more in favor of saying a building that is only able to achieve economic occupancy of 60 or 70% of its space at a good value for office building use should take that other 30 or 40% and convert it to residential that has 24-hour occupancy as opposed to 8 or 9 hour occupancy. And that is a trend that revitalizes all the businesses and the amenities, or excuse me, all the businesses in the neighborhood within which the building sits. I'm a big fan of converting cities, not just amenitizing buildings. So if you look at Hudson in New York, the reason its office buildings are successful is because of all the residential that's been built in and around it also. If we want to stop commutes, we have to, or reduce commutes and have people work and live in the same place. We have to be thinking that way. And I think that if you look at London, central London is the biggest problem in London is a reduction of office space. As a result of it was economically more effective to convert it to residential. So there's all these things going on, not just in space design and terms, but in city design that is going to impact the way we work in the future. And I think that has to be considered carefully as well. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. I've been saying it for 10 years. And how do property companies react to that, though? How do they recapitalize, restructure themselves? And it's usually not the developer. The developer is usually crazy, happy to do anything that's cool. It's usually the financial institution that capitalize the developer is where the stagnation is. It's the insurance company that gave the property company the money to build the building. And the property company is hamstrung and can't do these changes because of the structure of their own capital. All you can do is nod at that. I know I went on a little rant. I really think this is the issue. I really think this is the
No,
issue.
it's true. Well, I think I know. Listen, I think, yeah, you're 100% correct. And I actually, you know, as far as I've been doing this, right? We tried, 2.5 decades ago. We embarked on a joint venture with a long term stay company to make an effort to combine people who travel with work with their workplace. I did a deal with a new build that has co-working and apartments within the one building. And I do wonder, I have to question that because I would not personally, and I'm just going to take my personal, it's all about me. I'm going to take my personal preference. Well, everything that you said makes a lot of sense. The dinner, I'm not going to go back to my office building to have dinner. I might stay late to have a business dinner, but I'm not going to bring my family there. I'm not going to, if I'm going out, you
The
know.
restaurant can't survive on lunch alone.
No, the restaurant can't survive on lunch alone. But the thing is, is that do we want a harder line uh, between work and personal? Do I want to wake up, take an elevator to to my office, and take an elevator to where I'm going to go to dinner, and then go down to the gym? I'm
Well, it
just not
doesn't
sure.
necessarily have to be the same building, by the way. And if you look at London, New York, Chicago, people live downtown and walk 6 blocks to their office or 10 blocks to their office
That's
or
right.
cycle to their office, things of that nature. So it doesn't, you don't have to live, work, eat, shop in your one building.
Right.
But buildings that offer that capability overall revitalize the city and reduce the 8 hour, 12-hour city syndrome of commuters overall. And that means there are more amenities, more services within the city itself. They're more vibrant, and that makes the city more desirable and makes the workplace more desirable also.
I
Most
think
people
so. Yep.
would like to be able to cycle, walk, or take very short public transportation to their workplace.
Well, and I think that that really doubles down with all work. I did an article that with the headline of are the CEOs who are mandating return to office actually the good guys or the good people? um, and 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 so the idea though is that when you have these cities that are actually so reliant upon the office or commercial the office real estate to bring that vibrancy, to bring that footfall, to fuel the local restaurants and flower shops and tailors or dry cleaners. When those people aren't showing up to work, we are seeing the result of
Exactly. It's
that on the
devastating.
city. It's devastating. And so I think you're right, having that more holistic mix of live, work, um, play, if you will, within an a certain radius makes a whole bunch of sense. It makes a more vibrant community,
Well, that's the way cities developed originally.
of course.
Live Work started with a shop on the bottom floor on the street level and an apartment above, and
Yeah.
maybe you were a tradesperson of some sort. In fact, before that, you lived above the cows that lived down on the first floor. So live work has always been around, and
Yep.
that's how cities were built. So I don't think that's going to change. But I guess that how do we get the needs of the occupiers translated through the property companies that have massive, massive investment from financial institutions? How do you affect change in a manner that can impact an entire city or an entire way that we work fast enough to not have big holes in the whole process?
Yeah, and certainly that's what I grapple with, because when I think of the writing on the wall with all the classical change drivers that are um, compelling this change, right? Compelling, in terms of where, when, how people work, who's going to work, all of that stuff. But then I think of all the friction that's on the other side of enabling and supporting this change. It's very challenging, which is why I say that this has to be number one, we have to be informed by other categories, right? When you look at the evolution of Blockbuster and then to Netflix home delivery and then to Netflix streaming, or if you look at the evolution of the record industry, where it used to be the record companies had complete control over the content that was being distributed, and then you have Napster that ultimately went out or is having revitalization, and then you had streaming music going directly to the end user, putting the power in the hands of the end user. our category is the same. It used to be that less than 1% of knowledge workers could make a workspace related decision. That fact has changed. Every single person who reports to the office has the ability to make a workspace related decision as to where they're going to go. And regardless of whether there's that return to office mandate, if going into an office is not compelling, it's not going to happen, and they're going to leave and they're going to go work someplace else. And so there are so many change forces driving this change, but how do we get, to your point, the capital markets? How do we get the landlords? How do we get all these brokers aligned to support enable that change? Which is why I say a revolution is required. I agree with you, but I don't think that a revolution will be enabled. I think it has to be slow and methodical changes. I also think, I'll just say, I'll end with this, is that it has to be moved off of the pages of the property publications, and it has to be moved into the general business discussion. This is a general business discussion. It has to be moved from the commercial real estate, head of commercial real estate, into the overall general business and be addressed by, has to be addressed by HR. It has to be addressed by the CFO, the COO, the head of technology, the head of property. The silos of this decision-making process have to be broken down in order to affect this change as well.
The CEO of a major company, any industry, one of their primary goals is we always want to have the best people. We have to have the best people in order to compete and in order to win in our industry, whatever the industry is. So the battle for talent is the massive driver.
Yeah.
And Randstad, who's the largest human resources management company in the world, would tell us, they do tell us, that they get a 5 times return on applications when they include the word remote, hybrid, flexible work, etc., in the job description.
Yeah.
So 5 times as many people are seeking one of those things or all of those things in their new employment structure. And that says downtown's dead. Okay. So downtown has to redevelop itself, which means cities have to allow for this. Government has to allow for this. Tax structures have to be reconsidered for this, et cetera, et cetera. It's not just the property companies and the investors behind them. It's a holistic approach to the redevelopment of the way we work and live. And if that's going to occur, it's going to take more than a revolution. It's going to take almost a complete DNA gene pool change. We're going to go through a full Darwinistic adjustment of those that are adaptable will survive, and those that are not adaptable will not survive. And I think that'll be true of cities as well. If you go back through history, thousands of years, certain cities evolved, famous cities go back thousands of years, and then disappeared for some reason.
Yeah.
The water changed, the people changed, the trade route changed, something happened, and that city just stopped existing. Will that occur today? Probably not, because of the densities we have. But the desirability of the cities and the economics of all that has to work together. And it really comes down to the economics ultimately. Can people, is it worth investing in buildings of this nature in downtown central business districts today? And you and I know that the flexible workspace industry, which is considered to be one of the major tenants now in the world, has moved to the suburbs. You know, the most of the growth is in the secondary and tertiary markets. And that tells us that's where people want to be, that's where people are, et cetera. So cities are going to have quite a challenge if they don't meet this amenity rich environment culturally. You know, I want to live in Manhattan because of the culture. It's kind of a scary thought when you think about it, but at least to me.
To me too.
You know, I like the pizza though. But these things are all have to be considered. And I'd like to say I have a solution or have an idea of a solution, but I really don't.
Yes, I don't either. My only solution is to chip away with it a little bit at a time. And the writing is on the wall though. When you look at 40% footfall, 40% of the people are showing up. There is going to be this extraordinary rippling effect that's going to happen if you take if you just take some of the top occupiers who have a million people who are showing up to offices every day, and they start to rebalance their portfolio, and they start to include flexible workspace solutions into their portfolio, um, there will not be enough flex around the world to support that demand.
Right.
And there is a product market fit issue because landlords are not going to be able to satisfy that demand.
Agreed completely.
Not going to be, and their buildings are going to sit empty, and these leases are just going, they're the sublet, the shadow space, all that stuff it's just going to
Let let's let's leave this to next time.
yeah.
Okay, and I'm going to make a bold statement, that the solution to empty office space in conventional commercial buildings that was previously occupied by conventional tenants, particularly large institutional tenants. The solution to that occupancy is to replace that space with flexible workspace. Flexible workspace meaning business centers, co-working centers, serviced offices, etc. Um, and to allow that type of enterprise to replace the changes in the conventional enterprise. I don't know whether that's people will buy off on that or not, but I think that's a contribution to the solution that we all need to consider.
Well, it very clearly is, and I'll just end with this, is that over the course of time, when you look at these assets, they have outsourced their restaurants, they have outsourced their gyms, they have outsourced the cafe and all the other amenities because it is not their core competency. It's not what they have done, and they're trying to find this solution for short term and smaller spaces through spec suites. But when you do the numbers, the spec suites don't pencil out for the asset owner. They don't pencil out for the landlord. And so the idea of bringing in a flex partner and doing it in a partnership way makes sense. And even though when you map it out in the pro forma, when you build the business case and the economics are over the top compelling, there remains resistance because of all this friction that's getting into place to block the change. And so that is something that I would very much look forward to speaking with you again in the future about, is how do you overcome that friction in order to progress the
Well,
evolution of these assets.
that friction comes from the financial institutions, not from the property companies. So
Yeah.
that's where, as an industry, as a flexible workspace industry, we need to start working, I think, to con- cause the economic conversion to occur. Um,
Yeah, I
so
agree.
Andrea, thank you very, very much. It's a pleasure speaking with you as always. Look forward to exploring these and other thoughts in the future again sometime. And very grateful to you for all that you've done for the flexible workspace industry. And we'll look forward to it.
Thank you, Frank. It's a pleasure.
If it's impacting the future of work, it's in the Future of Work podcast by allwork.space.